Let's do something a little different on this week's episode of the How to Be an Author podcast. Let's talk about hooking. If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karena Akhavein, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation. No, get your mind out of the gutter. I'm not talking about that kind of hooking. I'm talking about creating a great opening hook that grabs your reader's attention at the beginning of your book. I'm also talking about how to hook your ideal audience to get engagement and attention and how to keep it on social media, which is getting harder and harder these days. And yes, I am actually going to be talking about authors selling themselves, or at least being afraid of selling out. Welcome to the How to Be an Author podcast. I'm writing coach Karena Akhavein, and it is my absolute passion in life to help authors like you go from idea to published and everything in between. I address things like craft, mindset, and the business of being an author. And this is why this week I thought that this would make a really fun subject. And I hope that I hooked you with that first intriguing statement that I made at the beginning of this podcast. That's an example of a hook that might work. In this episode, you'll hear what I had to say to 3 different authors who were having crafting, mindset, and business issues with their writing career. So let's start with author number 1. I was talking with author number 1, who's a little bit of a newer author. Her name is Leanne, and she's been starting to write a book. She's got a whole series in mind, and her books do skew a little bit more adventure fantasy. And she's been really struggling and writing and rewriting her first chapter because she's been struggling to find a good hook. And I think it's really, really important actually to get this right. I sometimes tell authors who are a little bit less new to the game that they can just kind of keep writing and that we'll go back and find a good hook. And I think that that's a really good piece of advice in general. But for many authors, this bleeds into the whole mindset thing. Not finding a good hook for your book can impact your mindset and the overall writing process in a few ways. The first thing is, obviously, it's going to lead to some frustration and self-doubt. You're hitting a wall when trying to craft a great beginning to your book, so you can start to question your abilities as a writer and wonder if your story is even worth telling. And I don't want that to happen. So this is why sometimes when people come to me and say, I really just want to get it right at the beginning, I kind of go with it. Because also the frustration of not finding the right hook can lead to procrastination. I know so many writers who were really gung-ho and then they struggled with the beginning and started putting off writing altogether or focusing on other nitty-gritty, less critical aspects of their book or reworking the rest of, the outline over and over again, things like that. I see it a lot. And if that's you, you're not the only one. The pressure to create an engaging hook definitely leads to anxiety. You start to become anxious before it's even finished about how your book's going to be received, whether it's going to get published, all of that stuff. So I don't want you to not move forward and have these creative blocks. And also, the opening does set the tone and the direction for the rest of the book, which is true, but there actually is such a thing as overthinking it. You can absolutely rewrite and revise the beginning of your book endlessly. Believe me, I've been there, done that. And I've seen so many writers who've done this over and over again, and they're never satisfied with the result. And the thing that I'll say is, guess what? It's good enough for now. Or it's fine, let's move on. Maybe you'll find a better one. Maybe the better one was 3 ideas ago. And also, maybe better luck next time. So remember, stop comparing your different beginnings to each other too much. Stop overthinking it, and also stop comparing yourself to others. Oftentimes, you start comparing your work to that of more successful authors, and you're like, oh my God, they came up with the best hook. Well, now that's over. I can't do that anymore. And that erodes your confidence and hinders your creative process. So let me tell you what I give authors as a little piece of advice for that. I say don't compare, but I don't say don't learn from other authors. I think that if you're really hesitating about how to write a great hook, just pick up a bunch of books in your genre in a bookstore and look at the first paragraph for each of these books. And yes, you'll find that some are absolute genius. You'll find that others are okay or even not so great. So this is a great idea to start to get an idea of what other authors have done hook-wise that worked for them. I really like that because I think it's a great way, like visiting a bookstore for me, mindset-wise, when I'm not feeling so great, it gets me going again. It reminds me of why I'm doing this thing. And I always recommend going and visiting a completely, brick and mortar bookstore if you can, preferably an independent bookstore, all the better. And it's such a learning experience. There is no end to the type of thing you can learn from going to a bookstore. So I highly recommend doing that all the time. I've done episodes on going to the bookstore before, and I think I will definitely do another one very, very soon. The main thing is I want you to stay passionate about your writing project so that you can maintain motivation. Losing enthusiasm is not where we want you to be. So if that's you and you feel your will to write petering out and that you're listening to this podcast hoping for inspiration, I hope that it's going to give you that. I think it will. But also, please reach out to me, your writing coach, or download my DIY author workbook. All of that is going to help you to feel so much better about your project and make you confident that, yes, you can do this thing. Perfectionism is definitely not going to help your writing. It's going to slow down your process. So don't forget that struggling with the opening hook is a common challenge for many writers. You are not alone, but it's essential to recognize when this is happening and to recognize the challenges. And I've developed over time in my career as a writing coach, I've developed a bunch of strategies that can help you to overcome this challenge. And remember, when I give advice in these sorts of forums, whether it's my podcast or whether it's in one of my courses or my workbooks, remember that you are allowed to pick and choose. You're allowed to say, you know what, this tip here really works for me and this one doesn't. Writing is not one size fits all. So what I do with my one-on-one clients is that we talk things through and we see, does this work for you? Yes, great. No, let's find something else, okay? So let's talk about a few of the different concrete pieces of advice that I have given authors, including Leanne, when it comes to improving their opening. Number one, start with a question. If you can kind of come up with a thought-provoking question at the beginning of your story, this can engage readers' curiosity and make them want to find the answer within your writing. But you don't need to start with a question like you might in a blog post or in an essay. You might want to pose your question in a way that's more subtle, like not question form. It doesn't need a question mark necessarily, right? So show a situation where your main character is struggling with some kind of existential question that they might have, or how they're going to survive to, live to the next day, things like that. That's the type of question I'm talking about. Another thing you can do is use vivid descriptions. Now, paint a vivid picture with your words, set the scene, create a sensory experience for the reader, and engage their senses by describing the sights, the sounds, the smells, the textures. This is a good way of getting your reader to plunge into the mood and the themes of your story. However, watch out, because I know so many writers who write these really beautiful descriptions, but then they never go anywhere. They keep describing, and they get descriptionitis. I've talked about researchitis before. Descriptionitis is kind of the same. So make sure that when you're writing your description, that you also have a character within this description. I want to meet your character at the beginning. If there's nothing else that you can think of as a hook, that's great, but don't make it an empty description. Don't make it a pointless description that's just pretty. Make it work for your story. Another piece of advice that you'll often see, and that I also give sometimes, is that I'll say begin in the middle of the action. However, I need to give you a little caveat for this, because yes, when you start a scene with something exciting or mysterious happening, it can pull readers into the story immediately, leaving them wanting to know more. But the important thing is, I've seen so many authors who will write this like giant battle scene or some kind of suspenseful scene where the main character is doing things, but we don't really care about what they're doing because we don't know the character. So we don't know the stakes. So when you're starting in the middle of the action, it's better than starting off slow sometimes, but not always. But you definitely need to introduce me right away to an intriguing and compelling character. This is somebody whose personality, situation, or background is intriguing. You don't need to take a whole paragraph or a whole chapter to describe this character and make them compelling to me. Sometimes it's enough to just describe how they're moving through the scene, or how they're just reacting to things that are happening, or a thought that they have, or a weird thing that they do that now compels the reader to go, that's interesting. Why did they do that? So you're just giving a little hint that this character is somebody who is intriguing and that you want to know more about. So when you're inserting them into the action, we already start to care. That's pretty cool. Another thing you can do, if you have a story that's based kind of in the real world, you can kind of share a startling fact or statistic. Now, again, this is not essay writing 101, right? This is not, did you know that 97% of blah, blah? No. But what if you're writing a historical novel and you show some aspect of the world that your novel's set in that people don't know about? So you can talk about, I don't know, people in London washed their clothes in the Thames and, dead cats would float by. Something like that. That's kind of intriguing and interesting and that people hadn't really thought of before. They said, oh, really? This is the way it was? And then show how your character is relating to that fact or statistic, how it shapes their world. Creating a sense of mystery, and enigma and anticipation of like, wow, I'm going to learn some things in this book. This is really interesting. And you can do this in other ways in various other genres as well, but pretty fun. Another way of getting people to enter deep into your world right away, or to get to know your characters right away, is you can start with snippets of dialogues. Make them capture the essence of your characters and hint at the central conflict, and you're in. That's kind of fun. I really love that. So think bold, but also think more about the tone, the perspective, and all of that good stuff. And you might not get it right at the beginning. You're going to need to edit. You're going to need to revise. You're going to need to pare it down. So I've been working with Leanne, and we worked and worked and worked until we got to kind of a scene that really worked. And then she brought me her scene and we were going over it. And I said, you can take out this first paragraph, because it was introducing something she didn't need to introduce. And we reworked it so that we really did dive into that scene right to where we're getting to know the main character and something exciting is happening. And she's golden. She's got it just right. And then my job was to convince her that she did not need to go back for now until she tests it with her beta readers. Beta readers are such a great asset for you to have. They are your writing or reading peers who gather feedback, who give you your feedback on effectiveness of your storytelling. They're going to provide these great insights and suggestions and really make use of them. But for now, don't worry. Just grab the reader's attention, set the stage, and experiment. And you're going to find what works best for your story. So I hope that these tips really help to find a hook that reels people in. Sorry about the fishing imagery, but it works. And but that, I think, is really all that you need to do, is to know that the hook has a job to do and that you can keep experimenting with it. And also that the hook in the greater scheme of things is a smaller piece of your narrative. And so you can absolutely rework it without having to go back to the drawing board for the rest of the book. So that's that. Keep it in perspective. Okay, now let's talk about author number 2. Patricia. I first came across Patricia in one of my writing groups, and I started to see that she had kind of a unique personality, unique character. We were talking about editing our books, hiring an editor, and even having beta readers. And she said, well, I don't really believe in that because I really want to be artistically have my integrity, basically. I want to be creatively unique and I don't want to sell out. I'm writing for me and I think I'm going to find an audience writing for me. And if I'm not writing exactly the way that I would write it, that's selling out. And that means that I don't have my artistic vision respected. I'm making these commercial compromises. It's diluting my work. It's leading me away from my true creative vision. And it's super not authentic. Patricia was like, I don't care what popular trends are. I don't care about these expectations. I don't want them to pressure me into making my writing seem inauthentic and insincere. And also, she was very much planning on self-publishing because she said, well, I don't want to lose creative control over my work. The publishers are going to dictate changes that are market-driven, not artistically motivated. They're also going to try to tell me what my cover needs to look like. And also, though, at the end of the day, I looked at Patricia and I realized that this fear of selling out wasn't coming so much from a desire for authenticity. It was really coming from a fear of criticism and rejection. When I came to her with that, she said, no, I don't want people to think that I'm compromising my art for financial gain. And I was like, oh boy, okay. Well, we all have different fears, and selling out means different things for all of us. And sometimes I'll make light of it and I'll make a joke of it and say, you should be so lucky that you have the opportunity to sell out. Many authors never get to the point where they need to make all this financial gain and they have to compromise their artistic integrity. But I understand I have to be a little bit more serious about the fear of selling out because it does have an impact on many, many writers. So I've learned to respect this a lot more than I may have as a more newbie writing coach or as a younger writer who would hear other authors talking about selling out. And I'd be like, oh, I'll sell out in a minute. I'll sell my books at McDonald's if it means being a best-selling author. But not everybody feels that way. So I've seen fear of selling out impact people and give them a lot of stress and anxiety. It is an internal conflict, right? Between your creative goals and commercial success. Writing a book is hard work, and it's normal to want to make some money from your book. Some of us want to make money. Some of us don't really want to make that much money, but we still kind of do. After we put our book out into the world, we want to have some effect. We want to see some kind of result from us doing all this work and putting ourselves out there. So no matter what that might be, and I'm going to tell you how to deal with that, I think that it's really important to reflect on your core values and on your real principles. Understanding what truly matters to you when nobody else is looking, that's going to be the way that you can really navigate the sea that lies between integrity and compromise. Authors also are really afraid that they are going to be, if they're taking risks, that means that they're going to be perceived as, selling out, or vice versa, that if they're supposed to, do something that's creatively viable, they can't take risks or explore new ideas. They might be pigeonholed into one genre. Like, let's say that they've been writing some fantasy, for example, that's been successful and they wanted to write romance, but they're like, oh, no, because what are people going to think? This was working. Or they're going to think, okay, I've been writing this thing that's not working. I want to explore something else. Oh, now people are going to think that I'm trying to do whatever it takes to sell more books. So really, in either direction, you're kind of, screwed if you do, screwed if you don't, right? Where creative stagnation can definitely ensue. And the fear of selling out can definitely prevent authors from embracing opportunities that could enhance their career or help them to reach a broader audience. Many times, I'll tell authors like, okay, have you thought of being on, Bookstagram or Book Talk? And they're like, oh my God, no, that's people who are pandering to their audience. I don't want to sell out. I'm, writing 100% of the time. I think that can be a missed opportunity. So definitely look and see and be honest about the fact that sometimes our fear of selling out is preventing us from really finding something that could make us really happy, both creatively and financially, something that could help us to communicate and reach a broader audience. So that's really important. Decision-making becomes more challenging because you've got this indecision and these delays because you start to see these different options, and the fears of being perceived a certain way keep kind of getting you to hit these walls along the way. Because I think that ultimately fear of selling out is not just about your artistic integrity, but it's also about the fear of how you are perceived. Are you perceived as an artist? Are you perceived as, some kind of a pushy salesperson? That's fair enough, right? We're all perceived a certain way, but definitely how to overcome your fear of selling out, clarifying your values and your artistic principles is going to be the key. Now, the other thing that you can and should absolutely do once you've clarified these values, set clear boundaries for yourself, right? What are your limits? What are the aspects of your work that are non-negotiable, right? If somebody says, hey, I have a great idea, we're going to take your work and we're going to feed it into AI and we're going to do this and you're going to get a cut. Maybe your boundaries are such that that's not what you see as being part of your artistic process. And that's absolutely fair enough. And remember, just because you've set boundaries now doesn't mean that you can't revisit your boundaries. You don't have to have the same boundaries for the rest of your life. Another thing that you want to do when you have a little bit of a fear of selling out and you want to have some creative control and that you want to have your creative vision respected is that you want to choose the right professionals to work with. So many people who are afraid of selling out, they think they need to completely go it alone because anyone is going to try to make their book something that it wasn't. A publisher is going to make you change it. An agent's going to be like, can you tweak it and make it this genre? The editor is going to be like, let me rewrite this for you. That's not the case with every writing professional. Many publishers, agents, editors understand your vision. They respect it. Open communication is essential, but let me tell you that when I do editing, which right now I don't have any open editing spots, but sometimes I do. But I do have some open spots for editorial assessments, just a couple a month. So you can keep going back to my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com, and seeing if you can apply for an editorial assessment, because I believe that your creative vision is essential. Any advice that I will give you as a writing coach is meant to improve your work in your voice and not write a whole different book. It's meant to be making your book as good as it can be and still be yours. So definitely take that opportunity. If you want an assessment and you want me to be like, okay, I love what you do with this style. I love your voice. I love this. Think about, how you're developing this character. I always pose my feedback as some kind of suggestion or question, never a change. But speaking of change, embrace it. It's great to evolve and grow as an author. The landscape of publishing is always changing. The market is always changing. And adapting doesn't mean selling out. It means that you're learning and growing. As authors, that's something that we do all the time. I think that's one of the biggest advantages and the biggest highs of being a writer is that it's one of those passions and professions where you are always learning and growing. And that's such a gift that we have. And also remember your audience. You're not just writing for yourself. Your work can have an impact on readers. Your artistic vision has the audience and audience engagement in mind. That's what makes it so meaningful and resonant. Your audience, your reader is part of that magical equation. It's an alchemy that happens when your words go from your head to the paper or the screen to your audience's imagination. So remember that. You are having an impact. How can you best do that? And definitely when you're doing all these things, when you're exploring, when you're tweaking, when you're thinking of ways of, making your writing career resonate and work better for you, you do want to stay true to your voice. And you might want to go back and check the podcast episode earlier this season about finding your author voice. This is going to help you to maintain a strong connection to your unique voice and style while still exploring new themes, new genres, new whatevers. So evolution doesn't equate to selling out if you're able to stay true to yourself. Remember to shift your perspective as well. Success is not a threat to your integrity. It's an opportunity to reach more readers and to continue creating art and to see the value of your words. All of that is really beautiful. It's part of the artistic process, or at least it can be. So look at how your perspective may be. Look at whether you're limiting yourself with this idea that success is automatically a bad thing. Overcoming the fear of selling out is about finding a healthy balance between artistic integrity and career success. Just remember, stay true to your values, but you can make informed decisions. You can be open to growth and change, and you can navigate this whole writing and publishing thing while preserving your artistic identity, but also seeing new avenues and new ways of finding success as a writer. Be kind to yourself, be compassionate to yourself, and let me know how it goes. If you're trying to find your way still, you might want to take one of my courses, like From Idea to Published in 6 months, because I think that it really does balance this whole writing success thing with this how to figure out what kind of an author you really are thing. So I try to make sure that you've got the craft and the mindset really well woven together so that you can build a career for yourself without feeling like you're just a sellout. Now let's talk about author number 3, Jamie. Jamie was having a really hard time. First of all, I talked with Jamie about selling out, in fact, because Jamie was very reticent to build an author platform. And I was like, okay, but you kind of need to do this. You know, social media is important to your author platform, if only because you are trying to build a mailing list and you're trying to funnel people onto your website and all this stuff. But I was trying to get down to the bottom of why Jamie didn't want to start building this author platform until finally I found out the truth, that they had experimented a little bit with social media and they hadn't managed to hook their audience. They had been putting out posts and a couple videos, and they had really found crickets, right? So they weren't getting any engagement, and that really made them feel very unhappy. and so that, I think, made them develop this aversion to the whole idea of an author platform. And I am the first to tell you that social media is a necessary evil. I've found a lot of my success on social media, and it's been a growth and learning process, and it's something that you can absolutely replicate. So I have created a social media platform at this point where I have over 150,000 followers over various platforms. And this is something that has given me a voice, has given me confidence. It's led to book sales. It's led to course sales. It's led to finding great clients. It's led to communication with other writers or with readers. And so social media has definitely been at the foundation of a lot of my success with my writing career. However, it's also something that can be very frustrating. I'll be the first one to tell you that social media is algorithm based. It's always changing. It can be incredibly frustrating. I was talking to a client this week who was saying, this is ridiculous. When you first trained me to do my TikTok videos for my books, I was getting a ton of views, and now my views have petered down to almost nothing. What do you think is going on? What can I do? And my answer was basically play around with it and wait, because that algorithm is always changing and it messes with your head. It is no reflection of your value, but it is something that really affects you in so many ways. So let's talk about some of the reasons why Jamie and a lot of other authors feel that they are not able to hook an audience and maintain an audience on social media. And I'm going to give you a few workarounds for this. The first reason that social media is so hard to get attention on is that it's so saturated. Social media platforms are flooded with content from various individuals, businesses, content creators. It makes it really challenging for authors to stand out and capture the audience's attention. And that's why, you're never going to compete with a huge business that is putting out a bunch of advertising and that has professional people doing their posts and that has somebody full-time doing this and that looks uber professional. So you might as well be yourself. So remember that. But oftentimes there's also a type of lack of engagement. So this is if you can't create a strong hook, if you're not engaging or interactive in your posts, followers will probably just scroll past without paying much attention. So remember that it is important to create engagement, and it's not about just blasting things out there. It's about creating a conversation. This is such an important idea. This is where I really learned how to grow my social media accounts, was when it's not just about me. It's about a conversation with my ideal audience. Another big issue that I see with authors posting on social media is that they're so inconsistent. You cannot maintain your audience's interest or the algorithm's interest when you're not consistent. Consistency is key for the algorithm and for keeping your audience engaged. So if you're posting 3 things today and then you skip, a whole week and then you come back with 1 thing and then you skip 2 weeks and you come back with 10 things, that's not as helpful as if you're posting something consistently every 2 days, every week. Every day is ideal. And I know that this gets really, really heavy to do. And I have a bunch of tips in my course From Idea to Publish in 6 months. And also in my workbook, DIY Author, I have a bunch of tips on how to streamline the posting process so that you can create more posts from the same content. You can reuse it in different ways so that you're not spending all your time posting on social media. You need to spend some of your time writing and, interacting with your audience as well in different ways, and also even writing emails to them. Some of you get my emails, and so you know that at least once a week you're going to get something from me. That takes some time. If I was posting on social media every single minute, I wouldn't have time to do that. Now, sometimes I feel I am posting every minute. That's a whole other story. But for you, just be consistent. Another reason that authors have a problem hooking an audience on social media is that they don't use the right type of content. Many of the platforms are visually oriented, things like Instagram and Pinterest. If you're not using an eye-catching visual, you're not going to grab the audience's attention. You need to tailor your posts or your videos or your images to the platform that you're using. And oftentimes you're also picking the wrong platform. If you're not active on the social media platforms where your target audience spends their time, you might be missing out on the opportunity to connect with potential readers. So I have had a few author clients who've been on, LinkedIn basically. And I'm like, you're okay. So you're posting articles about writing on LinkedIn. Well, unless you're writing a business book, that's not where you're going to be finding your fiction readers. Other writers were trying to get traction on Twitter, or X, I guess, as we're calling it now. And they're not able to engage that audience because the format that Twitter had, unless you're maybe a comedian who can write like a short little funny, cryptic sentence that really hooks people and gets them to engage. If you're not doing that as a writer, that's not really representing, what you do. So those are the wrong social media platforms. You definitely need to be looking at where is my audience, but also where is my audience that I can show them what I do. Remember also, so many authors come to me, and Jamie was also doing this, where the content they were posting on social media did not align with their brand or with the themes of their work. And it actually confused potential readers because there was a lot of posting about one thing when their writing's about another thing. So remember that if your brand is, writing, romance novels, and you're posting about gardening, unless your books are set in the garden, maybe you're not so aligned. That's really important as well. And the problem is sometimes when you're experimenting on social media and there's one thing that starts to resonate with your audience, many of us do tend to sell out in a way where we start to create content to what was successful. And then we find that we have come far away from what we originally were talking about that was actually kind of on brand for us. And I have to say that one thing that I'm doing on one of my platforms is I realize that my brand has kind of skewed into something completely different on the social media platform. So I'm actually going to sell out. I'm going to do it. I'm going to write a book to what this new audience wants as well. That doesn't mean I have to give up my other stuff, but you need to then start leading your platform, to a place where it works for you. So remember to be aligned. That's really important. The other piece of good news with social media is that what's really important on social media is storytelling. You're an author. You are a storyteller extraordinaire. So don't miss out on using the power of a good narrative to connect with your audience emotionally. You're the one who knows how to hook a reader with a great first sentence. Use storytelling on social media. It is so important. This is the way that you do it. This is the way that you engage. And then your audience gets to know your voice. That's really great. And it's not about the audience just knowing you. You want to know the audience. What are your target audience's preferences, interests, behaviors on social media? Tailor your content to their needs and expectations while still making it work for you. Remember consistent branding. When people see a post of yours, they should know that it's you, or at least, be like, oh, okay, this fits. So how does your brand image and your message, how does it remain consistent across all social media platforms? This helps to build a stronger platform, right? When it's cohesive, when it holds together, you become recognizable online on every platform. And remember to engage actively. Don't just post it and forget it. Respond to those comments, those messages, those interactions. Actively engage with followers. This really builds community. I find that you can actually build community on social media. I did not believe this years ago. I thought that it was just screaming into the void, and I realized that I've built such a strong community online, and it feels awesome. And my previous episode was about solitude and writing, and I was saying that you could actually feel community and feel less alone when you're doing certain types of social media posting, and it's so, so true, believe me. Use your visuals wisely, make everything appealing and shareable, share your journey, leverage your storytelling, offer value. Value is so important. You're not just talking about yourself. You are talking about things that are going to be beneficial to your audience. Jamie would tell me things when we would talk, and Jamie would say, oh, I don't think my audience cares about me. Like, they don't care when I say this and they don't care when I say that. Right. They might not. So how can you make them care? How can you give them something that they care about? How can you offer value that they are going to want to be like, wow, this person actually gets me. This is beneficial to me. And it's not just about giving them how-tos or giving them, these things that they can use for themselves. It's about inspiring them. It's about entertaining them. And it's things like that. So you can be like, hey, if you're a romance reader and you're going to love this genre, here's a little passage that might be, interesting to you, that you might enjoy, or here's a recommendation for romance books, things like that. Remember to use the right hashtags and keywords. These are always morphing and changing. So you definitely want to keep doing research into the keywords that are going to be making your posts more discoverable and what are going to attract a wider audience. You can also collaborate with other accounts if you want to. For me, this is something that is a little bit exhausting. I find that finding accounts to engage with and collaborate with can be a little bit much. However, you can repost things from other accounts, and that's really, really great as well. It's appreciated by the other influencers or the other authors or accounts, and it can bring you some new followers as well. Remember also the balance of promoting but not overselling on social media. Self-promotion is essential, but don't constantly promote your books. Balance promotional content with other engaging topics. All of my authors who try to, post some fun stuff, and they're like, oh, this is great. I posted, this fun stuff, and I posted this and I posted that. It's going great. I'm getting thousands of views. And then I post about my book and I get like 5 views. What's going on? Well, it's called the algorithm. And it's also called your audience. Sometimes your audience doesn't want to be told what to buy. So be patient. Building an engaged audience takes time. Don't be discouraged by slow growth or initial challenges. Often once you start to grow, then it starts to snowball. And that's really, really major. I think that really helps. So you might be, curious about exact hooks that might work for social media content. If you are on my mailing list, you're going to be getting some more specific hooks that you can use. But if you are a listener, you'll get a few right here. So if you're not on my mailing list right now, definitely go to creativeandwritingcoach.com and get on that mailing list. You'll be getting all kinds of goodies. But if not, here are some hooks. Things like behind the scenes teaser, like a day in the life of an author. That's really fun. Or what about a quiz or a poll? What about a visually appealing graphic with an intriguing quote from your book? What about a contest or giveaway? What about book recommendations that are really fast? What about doing, a question or a writing prompt or a visual storyboard of, your book, or teasing a book cover. There's so many things that you can do that are going to hook a potential reader. All right, I hope this really helped, because I think that it's a lot to digest, but I hope that you were kind of hooked and intrigued at the beginning, and that you're now seeing the possibilities of what you can do once you have that audience or that reader hooked and invested. Let's get them to dive into your world as an author without selling out. None of that. You get to really explore your craft and your passion as a writer. I think it's so important. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out on creativeandwritingcoach.com. And definitely, if you are wanting to write and publish your book in 6 months, I have my method that I share with you in DIY Author and From Idea to Published in 6 months. Definitely an investment into your writing career that will be so valuable for you in the long run. I look forward to being with you next time on the How to Be an Author podcast. If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com.